The July heat shimmered above the cracked asphalt of Willow Creek, Virginia, a forgotten town where dreams came to die quietly. Eleanor Pritchard, 63, leaned heavily on her oak cane as she made her way down the overgrown path behind Harmon's salvage yard. Her arthritis was acting up something fierce today. Good Lord, this heat's enough to make the devil himself ask for sweet tea, she muttered, dabbing at her forehead with a handkerchief that had belonged to her late husband. Thomas. That's when she heard it, a sound that would haunt her sleep for months to come. Not a bark, not a growl, a scream, a dog's scream, raw with such primal agony that Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. In her 40 years as a trauma nurse at County Memorial, she'd heard every sound a living creature could make in pain. This was worse. "Sweet Jesus," she whispered, her body moving before her mind could process fear. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Beyond the rusted chain-link fence lay a scene from a nightmare. A magnificent German shepherd, her black and tan coat nearly obscured by a writhing mass of yellow and black. Eleanor's mind refused to process it at first. It looked as though the dog's fur was moving. Then reality crystallized with horrifying clarity. Bees, hundreds, no, thousands of them, covering the animal like a living, vengeful blanket. Above, a massive hive hung partially broken from a sycamore branch, evidence of deliberate destruction visible in the rocks scattered nearby. Through the angry swarm, Eleanor caught glimpses of something pink and squirming beneath the dog's heaving belly. She just had her babies. Eleanor realized with a sickening jolt. She can't run. The dog's eyes, what could be seen of them through the grotesque swelling, found Eleanor's. In that moment, something passed between woman and animal, a primal understanding. "Help me, please." Willow Creek had once been a thriving mill town, back when Eleanor was a girl with pigtails and scraped knees. Now it was just another dying rural community where the young folks fled to cities as soon as they could manage, leaving behind the old, the stubborn, and those too poor to leave. Eleanor counted herself among the stubborn. After Thomas died in that house fire saving the Miller twins, friends suggested she move closer to her sister in Richmond. But the farmhouse on Mockingbird Lane held 40 years of memories she couldn't bear to leave. The German shepherd, probably abandoned when the recession hit and folks couldn't afford extra mouths to feed, was likely one of many strays that roamed the outskirts of town. But something about this one's eyes reminded Eleanor of Thomas. That same steadfast devotion, even in the face of unbearable pain. Eleanor fumbled for her phone with shaking hands, but the screen showed no service. Of course, Harmon's was in the dead zone. "Hang on, girl," she called, her nurse's instincts kicking in despite her fear. "I'll get help." But as she turned to hurry back to the road, she nearly collided with a small figure standing absolutely still on the path behind her. A little girl, no more than 8, with copper-red hair pulled into mismatched pigtails and a faded "Virginia is for Lovers" t-shirt 3 sizes too big. She was clutching something to her chest, a worn teddy bear missing one eye. "Gracie Thompson, child, you get back now," Eleanor commanded, recognizing the daughter of the local mechanic. "There's a hurt dog, and it's dangerous." But Gracie wasn't looking at Eleanor. Her unnervingly steady gaze was fixed on the suffering animal. "That's Athena," she said, her voice eerily calm. She lives behind the old paper mill. I named her. Something in the child's tone made Eleanor pause. You know this dog? Gracie nodded, her freckled face somber. I bring her food every day after school. 3 kids from my class followed me yesterday. Her small hands tightened around the teddy bear. They said they were going to teach the dirty mutt a lesson for growling at them. Before Eleanor could process this information, Gracie set her teddy bear carefully on a tree stump. With methodical movements, she reached into her worn backpack and pulled out what appeared to be a spray bottle and a white bed sheet. My grandma keeps bees out at the farm, she said simply. She taught me. Gracie! No! Eleanor lunged for the child, but arthritis made her slow. You can't help her, Miss Eleanor, Gracie said with the brutal honesty of childhood. Your hands shake too much for the stingers, and you're allergic to bees. Everyone knows 'cause of your medical alert bracelet. Eleanor glanced down at the red bracelet she'd worn for 30 years, stunned by the child's observation. Besides, Gracie continued, already wrapping the sheet around her small body like a makeshift protective suit. Athena won't let anyone but me touch her babies. Babies? Plural. Eleanor hadn't even been able to count how many puppies lay beneath the suffering mother. How do you know she had... I felt them moving yesterday, Gracie said, tucking the sheet carefully into her sneakers. I've been watching for 2 weeks. Grandma says you can tell when it's time. With movements that belied her years, Gracie fashioned a crude hood from the sheet, leaving only her eyes exposed. She picked up the spray bottle and turned to Eleanor. It's just vinegar and witch hazel, she explained. Confuses their smell message things, pheromones, she pronounced carefully, as if reciting a newly learned word. Can you call Dr. Franklin? Tell him I need a Epinephrine, Eleanor supplied. Astonished, Gracie nodded solemnly. Athena's face is too puffy. That means anaphil. Anaphylaxis, Eleanor whispered. How does this child know these terms? Tell him I counted 4 puppies so far. Gracie continued. Tell him they're still attached by their cord things. Tell him to hurry. Before Eleanor could stop her, Gracie was moving toward the fence with the deliberate calm of someone 4 times her age. Gracie Thompson, you come back here right this instant. Eleanor called, fear making her voice sharp. The little girl paused, looking back with eyes that seemed to hold knowledge beyond her years. Miss Eleanor, she said quietly, sometimes doing nothing is worse than doing something dangerous. The exact words Thomas had said before rushing into that burning house to save the Miller twins. Eleanor thought with a chill. Words she hadn't heard in 15 years, as if in a trance. Eleanor watched Gracie slip through a gap in the fence. The child approached the suffering dog with slow, measured steps, speaking in a low, steady voice. Hey, Athena girl, I know it hurts. I know you're scared, but I'm here now. I'm going to help your babies. The dog's agonized whining changed subtly, recognition flickering through the pain. Gracie began spraying the vinegar solution around the dog, never directly on her, but creating a perimeter that seemed to confuse the swarm. Some bees began to disperse, their attack pattern disrupted. With her free hand, She reached into her pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a plastic hotel key card. With methodical precision, she began gently scraping stingers from the areas where the bees had thinned, careful never to pinch them. "The poison sac keeps pumping if you grab the stinger," she explained, seemingly to herself. "You gotta scrape sideways." Eleanor stood transfixed, her nurse's mind cataloging the child's techniques with professional assessment. Perfect. Her movements are perfect. Gracie worked for what seemed like hours, but was likely only minutes, gradually clearing enough bees to reveal the full horror of Athena's condition. The dog's face was grotesquely misshapen, her muzzle swollen to 3 times its normal size, her tongue protruded, blue-tinged and engorged, making each breath a strangled wheeze. Yet despite her obvious agony, Athena was attempting to clean her newborn puppies with that same swollen tongue. Eleanor's paralysis broke. She hurried back to the main road, waving frantically at a passing truck. By some miracle, it was Ben Hollis from the hardware store who had a cell phone with service. "Need you to call Doc Franklin," Eleanor gasped. "Emergency! Dog attack by bees. Puppies being born. Behind Harmon's yard. Tell him to bring epinephrine. And tell him to hurry." Ben didn't waste time asking questions, already dialing as Eleanor hurried back to the fence. What she saw made her stop in her tracks. Gracie had cleared almost half of Athena's body of bees. The child worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon, all the while speaking in a low, constant stream of reassurance to the suffering animal. "You're the bravest mama dog in the world, Athena. Your babies are beautiful, 5 of them now. That's right. Keep cleaning them. You're doing so good." Eleanor had assisted in countless emergency procedures during her nursing career, but she had never seen such extraordinary care delivered in such dire circumstances, let alone by a child who should have been playing with dolls instead of performing what amounted to emergency field medicine. "Gracie, honey," Eleanor called softly, not wanting to break the child's concentration. "Help is coming, Dr. Franklin's on his way." The little girl nodded without looking up. "Good. She needs medicine soon. Her breathing's getting worse." As if to emphasize the point, Athena let out another of those terrible screams, weaker now, but no less heart-wrenching. A flash of movement caught Eleanor's eye. A sleek black Jeep Cherokee pulled up to the salvage yard entrance, and Dr. Franklin, the town's only veterinarian, emerged with his emergency kit. "Over here!" Eleanor called, waving frantically. Dr. Franklin, Jeffrey to his friends, jogged toward them, his face growing increasingly incredulous as he registered the scene. "Is that Gracie Thompson?" he asked in disbelief. "She knows the dog." Eleanor explained quickly. "Says her name is Athena. Just had puppies. Gracie thinks she's in anaphylactic shock." Dr. Sutton. Franklin's professional demeanor faltered. "Gracie said that anaphylactic shock. She's removing the stingers with a card edge." Eleanor continued. "Using vinegar solution to disperse the bees." A strange look crossed the veterinarian's face. "That's exactly what I would have." He shook his head and hurried toward the fence. What happened next would become the talk of Willow Creek for years to come. Dr. Franklin found not the scene of chaos he expected, but a little girl calmly attending to both mother and puppies with the composure of a seasoned professional. She had cleared most of the bees and was now using her own T-shirt, soaked in water from a bottle in her backpack, to cool Athena's burning skin, leaving herself in just a tank top under the sheet suit. "She needs epinephrine," Gracie said without preamble as the vet approached. "And maybe diphenhydramine. Her airways are closing." Dr. Franklin froze, staring at the child. "Gracie, how do you—" "5 puppies," she interrupted, gesturing to the squirming mass beneath Athena's belly. "All still breathing. This one's not moving much, though." She pointed to the smallest pup, nearly hidden beneath its siblings. The vet snapped back to professional mode, administering emergency treatment to the suffering dog while Gracie continued to tend to the puppies, ensuring they could nurse despite their mother's condition. "Keep them nursing if you can," Dr. Franklin instructed. "The colostrum in her first milk will help protect them from any venom that might have transferred." "I know," Gracie said simply. "That's why I made sure they stayed attached." Eleanor watched in amazement as child and veterinarian worked together with the synchronicity of longtime colleagues. "We need to get her to the clinic," Dr. Franklin said after stabilizing Athena's breathing. "The puppies, too." "They can't be moved yet," Gracie countered firmly. "The last one hasn't come." Dr. Franklin stared at her. "What?" Gracie pointed to Athena's straining body. "There's one more. She's been trying, but she's too weak now." The vet quickly examined the dog and looked up with astonishment. "She's right. There's another puppy. How did you know that?" But Gracie was already focused on comforting Athena, whispering encouragement as the exhausted dog struggled to deliver her final puppy. Ben Hollis returned with 2 other men from town who had heard about the emergency over the local gossip network that functioned more efficiently than any cell service. Together, they helped Dr. Franklin construct a makeshift stretcher from an old door they found in the salvage yard. "Got to be careful moving her," Dr. Franklin instructed. "The puppies are still attached by their umbilical cords. Any rough movement could cause bleeding." "I still don't understand how those bees got all over her," Ben said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Some kids from school did it," Gracie said flatly, not looking up from where she was gently helping Athena clean her newest puppy, a tiny runt with a white patch shaped like a star on its chest. "Tommy Gunderson and his friends. They knocked the hive down on purpose. I saw them following me yesterday when I was bringing Athena food." The men exchanged dark looks. In a small town like Willow Creek, where everyone knew everyone else's business, such deliberate cruelty would not go unaddressed. "I'll be having a word with Sheriff Barnes," Ben said grimly. "This ain't just mischief. This is plain evil." "Later," Dr. Franklin said firmly. "Right now, we need to get this mother and her puppies to the clinic. She's stabilized for transport, but I need a controlled environment to treat her properly." With extraordinary care, they lifted the makeshift stretcher with Athena and her 6 puppies. The mother dog was now too weak to protest, her swollen eyes fixed on Gracie as if ensuring the child was coming too. "I'll be right beside you the whole way," Gracie promised the dog, her small hand gently stroking the only patch of fur not marred by stings or swelling. "You did so good. Athena, you're the bravest mama ever." Eleanor felt her throat tighten at the tenderness in the child's voice. There was something almost sacred in the bond between this neglected little girl and the abandoned dog. 2 souls the world had forgotten, finding solace in each other. The procession to Dr. Franklin's clinic resembled nothing so much as a small-town funeral, With the jeep moving at walking pace while Gracie insisted on walking alongside, her hand reaching through the open window to maintain contact with Athena. Word spread quickly, and by the time they reached Main Street, a small crowd had gathered. Murmurs of shock and sympathy rippling through the onlookers. Marjorie Whittaker, the town gossip who ran the beauty parlor, gasped audibly at the sight of Athena's condition. Good heavens, what kind of monster would do such a thing to an animal? Kids, Ben replied grimly. Tommy Gunderson and his crew, according to Gracie. The mention of Bill Thompson's daughter brought a fresh wave of whispers. Everyone in town knew the situation. A father who had all but checked out after his wife's death 3 years ago, working night shifts and sleeping days, leaving young Gracie to essentially raise herself. That child, Marjorie whispered to Eleanor as they watched Dr. Franklin and Ben carefully carry the stretcher into the clinic. 8 years old and walking around town like a little ghost. When's the last time anyone's seen her in clothes that fit proper? Eleanor had no answer. Like most in town, she had noticed Gracie's situation, but done little beyond occasional concerned glances and whispered conversations. The stark reality of her own complicity in the child's neglect hit her with uncomfortable force. At the clinic, Dr. Franklin worked quickly to get Athena settled in the examination room, hooking her up to IV fluids and administering additional medication. To everyone's surprise, he allowed Gracie to remain in the room, even asking her to help monitor the puppies while he focused on their mother. I need someone with a gentle touch to keep them warm and make sure they're breathing properly, he explained. Though Eleanor suspected he recognized something in Gracie that the rest of them were only beginning to see, a natural healer with instincts that couldn't be taught. Sheriff Wade Barnes arrived 20 minutes later, his weathered face grim as he took notes on the incident. He crouched down to Gracie's eye level, his voice gentler than Eleanor had ever heard from the normally gruff lawman. Can you tell me exactly what happened with Tommy and his friends? Gracie, this is important, honey. Animal cruelty is a serious offense. Gracie looked up from where she was warming the runt puppy against her chest. They followed me yesterday after school. I go feed Athena every day with my lunch sandwich. I knew she was going to have puppies soon, so I've been bringing extra food. She continued with the straightforward clarity that only children possess, describing how Tommy, Luke Barton, and Peter Jenkins had taunted her about being the crazy dog girl and threatened to take care of the mutt if she didn't stop feeding it. I told them she was pregnant and to leave her alone, Gracie said, her voice finally breaking slightly. They just laughed and said that was even better. Then they'd get rid of more strays at once. Sheriff Barnes's jaw tightened visibly. Did you see them actually knock down the hive? Gracie shook her head. No. But Tommy showed me a video on his phone at lunch today. They were laughing about it. He said that's what happens to dirty mutts in his neighborhood. The adults in the room exchanged looks of barely contained fury. I'll be paying the Gunderson house a visit directly, Sheriff Barnes said, standing up. And the other boys' families, too. There'll be consequences for this. I promise you that. As the sheriff left, Eleanor noticed Gracie swaying slightly on her feet, the adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis finally ebbing away, without a word. Eleanor guided the child to a chair, noting with concern how thin her arms were, how pronounced the shadows beneath her eyes. When's the last time you ate something, honey? She asked gently. Gracie shrugged, her attention still fixed on the puppies. I gave Athena my lunch today. And yesterday, too. She needed it more 'cause of the babies. The simple statement, delivered without self-pity or expectation of praise, made Eleanor's heart constrict painfully. This child had been starving herself to feed a stray dog, and none of them, not one adult in this entire town, had noticed. 2 hours later, in the sterile environment of Willow Creek Veterinary Clinic, Eleanor sat beside Gracie in the waiting room. The child was wrapped in a borrowed scrub top, her own clothes covered in dirt, blood, and bee venom. "You did good today, Gracie," Eleanor said softly. "Real good. Your parents will be proud." Something shuddered in the little girl's expression. She clutched her one-eyed teddy bear closer. "My dad won't notice," she said matter-of-factly. "He works the night shift at the factory, sleeps all day." "And your mama?" Eleanor prompted gently, though she knew the answer. The whole town had gossiped about Rebecca Thompson's car accident 3 years ago, how she'd been driving home from an emergency veterinary call when she hit a patch of black ice. Gracie shrugged. "She died when I was 5. Dad says I look just like her, but I don't remember her face much anymore." A pause. "Sometimes I try real hard to remember, but it's like trying to hold water." Eleanor felt something crack in her chest. Before she could respond, Dr. Franklin emerged from the treatment room, his face a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. "She's stable," he announced. "All 6 puppies, too, even the runt. It's nothing short of miraculous." Gracie nodded, as if this was exactly what she'd expected. "Can I see her?" she asked. "In a bit," the vet promised. "But first, I think we need to talk about how you knew what to do today." Gracie looked down at her sneakers, suddenly every bit the 8-year-old again. "My grandma had bees." She repeated her earlier explanation. Dr. Franklin exchanged a glance with Eleanor before sitting down beside the child. "Gracie," he said gently, "your knowledge went way beyond beekeeping. You used medical terminology. You knew about anaphylaxis, epinephrine, and how to properly remove stingers. You even recognized that Athena wasn't done delivering her puppies. That's not something most adults would notice, let alone a child." Gracie remained silent, picking at a loose thread on her teddy bear's worn arm. "Honey," Eleanor prompted softly, "you can tell us. We just want to understand." After a long moment, Gracie reached into her backpack and pulled out a battered library book, Emergency Veterinary Medicine, A Practical Guide. "I've been reading," she said simply. "Since they closed the library branch near my house, I only get to go once a month when Grandma takes me, so I check out the biggest books I can find." Dr. Franklin gently took the advanced text, clearly meant for veterinary students, and opened it. Inside, dozens of colored sticky notes marked pages, with childish handwriting carefully annotating the margins. "You taught yourself emergency veterinary medicine?" he asked incredulously. Gracie shrugged again. "I like animals better than people," she said. "They don't yell when they're sad. They don't leave." The silence that followed was interrupted by Sheriff Wade Barnes pushing through the clinic doors, his face grim. "Got 3 boys down at the station," he announced without preamble. "Tommy Gunderson, Luke Barton, and Peter Jenkins, all admitted to knocking down that beehive onto the dog. Got it on video, too." He spat the last words with disgust. Said they didn't know she just had puppies, he continued, as if that makes it better. Eleanor watched Gracie's small hands curl into fists. They knew, the child said quietly. I told them yesterday when they followed me. I told them Athena was having babies soon, and to leave her alone. Something dangerous flashed in Sheriff Barnes's eyes. Did they now? He said softly. Well, that changes things. Dr. Franklin cleared his throat. What will happen to the dog and her puppies? Animal Control's already looking for a shelter that can take them, the sheriff replied. Nearest one that takes large breeds is in Richmond, though. No, Gracie said with unexpected force. Standing up, Athena's mine. I've been taking care of her for months. She trusts me. The adults exchanged uncomfortable glances. Honey, Eleanor said gently, I know you care for her, but you can't keep a German shepherd and 6 puppies. Your daddy doesn't care, Gracie finished flatly. He wouldn't even notice. Dr. Franklin knelt down to eye level with the child. Gracie, a dog like Athena needs space, proper care, medical attention. I can do all that, Gracie insisted, tears finally breaking through her composure. I've been reading. I know how to take care of her. Please don't take her away. She's the only one who... Her voice broke. She's the only one who stays. The raw emotion in her plea hung in the air. Eleanor felt her heart constrict painfully. Sheriff Barnes cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, there's the matter of the medical bills. Dog's going to need ongoing treatment. Puppies, too. County can't cover that. I have savings, Gracie said desperately. $312 from my birthday money and recycling cans. I've been saving for a bike, but Athena needs it more. Eleanor found herself speaking before she realized it. I'll cover the bills, she said firmly. And the dog can stay at my place until she's recovered. I've got nearly an acre fenced in since Thomas passed. 3 startled faces turned toward her. Miss Eleanor, Dr. Franklin began carefully, are you sure with your arthritis? And the puppies will need round-the-clock care for weeks. I didn't say I'd do it alone. Eleanor interrupted, looking pointedly at Gracie. I believe I've found myself a capable assistant. That is, if her father approves. The hope that bloomed on Gracie's face was almost painfully bright. I could come every day after school, she exclaimed. And all weekend Dad won't mind. He never does. Dr. Franklin looked between them thoughtfully. It could work. Gracie's certainly demonstrated competence beyond her years. He turned to the child with newfound respect. In fact, I could use help around the clinic this summer. Paid position, if you're interested in learning more. The transformation in Gracie was immediate, from desperate child to something approaching joy. Really? She whispered. You'd teach me? Seems to me you've already taught yourself quite a bit. The vet replied with a small smile. But yes, there's always more to learn. Sheriff Barnes shook his head in amazement. Well, I'll be. Talk about something good coming from something awful. The following weeks unfolded with the kind of routine that quickly felt as if it had always been that way. Every morning, Eleanor would wake early to check on Athena and her puppies. who occupied a comfortable enclosure on her screened back porch. By the time she had coffee brewing, Gracie would arrive on her second-hand bicycle, often before the school bus was due, eager to help with the morning feeding and medication. "Don't you need to eat breakfast?" Eleanor asked on the third day, noting the child had again arrived without having eaten. Gracie shrugged. "Dad doesn't really do grocery shopping. We usually have cereal, but the milk went bad." That afternoon, Eleanor drove to the Thompson house, a shabby rental on the edge of town, and left a casserole with a note explaining she'd be feeding Gracie breakfast before school to save time. Bill Thompson never acknowledged the gesture, but Gracie started arriving each morning to the smell of bacon and eggs or homemade biscuits. Dr. Franklin kept his word about the job, and Gracie began spending afternoons at the clinic, absorbing veterinary knowledge like a sponge. The child who had been all but invisible in town was suddenly the subject of admiration and no small amount of guilt among the adults who had overlooked her situation for so long. "I had no idea she was so bright," Marjorie Whitaker confessed to Eleanor during a hair appointment. "My Tommy says she's the smartest kid in school but never raises her hand in class, just sits in the back with her books." "Your Tommy also helped torture a dog," Eleanor replied with uncharacteristic sharpness. "Maybe spend less time gossiping about Gracie and more time teaching your grandson some basic humanity." The rebuke stung, but it was effective. Within days, Marjorie had organized a town meeting to discuss what she delicately called youth community issues, which quickly evolved into a broader conversation about animal cruelty prevention and support for children in difficult home situations. Meanwhile, Athena's recovery progressed remarkably well. The severe swelling subsided, though some scarring remained around her eyes and muzzle, giving her a slightly lopsided appearance that only enhanced her soulful expression. The puppies thrived under the combined care of Eleanor and Gracie, growing from helpless newborns to tumbling balls of energy that quickly claimed Eleanor's entire backyard as their playground. "We should name them," Gracie suggested one evening as she and Eleanor sat on the porch swing, watching Athena patiently supervise her offspring's antics. "They're your dogs," Eleanor replied. "You should do the honors." Gracie looked thoughtful. "Not all mine. This is your home. You should name some too." So together they christened the 6 puppies Atlas, the largest male with his mother's coloring, Luna, the gentle female with unusual amber eyes, Scout, the adventurous one always leading explorations, Ranger, the protective male who already mimicked his mother's watchful stance, Hero, the middle-sized female with boundless energy, and finally Peppermint, the tiny runt with the star-shaped white patch, who required extra care but fought with impressive determination to keep up with her siblings. "Peppermint's my favorite," Gracie confessed in a whisper, as though afraid of hurting the other puppy's feelings. "She's little, but she doesn't give up." Eleanor smiled, watching the child cradle the smallest puppy against her chest. "Reminds me of someone else I know." As July faded into August, the unlikely household settled into a comfortable rhythm. Gracie spent virtually all her free time at Eleanor's, helping with the dogs and, increasingly, with other household tasks. Eleanor discovered the child knew nothing about cooking or basic home maintenance, skills her father had never taught her, but was an eager student for anything Eleanor cared to teach. "My mom used to cook," Gracie told her one day as they kneaded bread dough together. "Dad says she made the best apple pie in 3 counties. A shadow crossed her face. "I wish I remembered it." "Tell you what," Eleanor said, dusting flour from her hands. "Why don't we try making an apple pie together? Maybe your hands will remember what your mind doesn't." The resulting pie was lopsided and slightly burned on one edge. But Gracie's face when she tasted it, a mixture of surprise, delight, and something like recognition, made Eleanor's heart swell with an emotion she hadn't felt since Thomas died. The community's response to Athena's story continued to evolve in unexpected ways. The three boys who had caused the attack faced juvenile court proceedings, but in an unconventional ruling, Judge Mitchell sentenced them primarily to community service, specifically at Dr. Franklin's clinic and at the newly established Willow Creek Animal Protection League, which had formed in direct response to Athena's ordeal. "Punishment alone doesn't teach empathy," the judge explained to a skeptical Sheriff Barnes. "These boys need to understand the consequences of cruelty, and the best way to do that is through direct exposure to the care of animals." To everyone's surprise, Tommy Gunderson, the ringleader, showed a remarkable transformation after just a few weeks working at the clinic. His initial sullenness gave way to genuine interest, particularly after Dr. Franklin assigned him to help with the rehabilitation of a hawk with a broken wing. "Never thought I'd say this," Dr. Franklin confided to Eleanor one afternoon, "but that Gunderson boy might have the makings of a decent veterinary assistant. He's got good hands and a mind that asks the right questions. Takes a special kind of person to recognize potential beneath bad behavior," Eleanor observed, thinking of how the vet had similarly seen past Gracie's shyness to her extraordinary capabilities. By late August, the puppies were weaned and growing rapidly. The question of their permanent homes became increasingly pressing, especially as school was set to resume in September. "We can't keep them all," Eleanor explained gently to Gracie, watching the child's face fall. "But we can make sure they go to good homes where they'll be loved and cared for properly." "I know," Gracie admitted, blinking back tears. "I've been making a list of people who might be good dog owners." The carefully written list, complete with pros and cons for each potential adopter, demonstrated once again the child's remarkable combination of intelligence and compassion. Dr. Franklin, of course, topped the list. Has medical knowledge, big yard, seems kind to animals, followed by Sheriff Barnes. Stern but fair, big house since daughters moved away, could use company. The librarian, Mrs. Porter, quiet home, understands responsibility, lets me read the veterinary journals, and surprisingly, Tommy Gunderson's family. Tommy is learning to be better, has big fenced yard, Mom is home all day. "You'd trust Tommy with one of Athena's puppies?" Eleanor asked, genuinely surprised. Gracie considered this seriously. "Not yet, but maybe by the time they're ready. People can change if you give them a chance, right?" The wisdom in this simple statement left Eleanor momentarily speechless. "Besides," Gracie added pragmatically, "I'd make him take Scout. She's the most forgiving one. But she doesn't put up with nonsense either. She'd train him right." Eleanor laughed, a full-throated sound that surprised her. It had been so long since she'd laughed like that. As September approached, Dr. Franklin pronounced Athena fully recovered, though the scarring around her eyes and muzzle would be permanent. "Battle scars," he called them. "The mark of a warrior mama." The question that had been postponed now loomed large. Where would Athena's permanent home be? The dog had grown deeply attached to both Gracie and Eleanor, following them from room to room with devoted attention, clearly considering herself part of their family unit. "She should stay with you," Gracie said one evening, her voice small but determined. "Your house is better for dogs. My dad might not let her inside when it rains." Eleanor studied the child's downcast face, reading the painful resignation there. At 8 years old, Gracie had already learned to expect disappointment, to preemptively surrender what she loved most, to avoid the pain of having it taken away. "Well, now," Eleanor said carefully, "seems to me Athena's gotten used to having both of us around. Might be hard on her to suddenly only have one of us." Gracie looked up, confusion in her eyes. "What if," Eleanor continued, choosing her words with deliberate care, "what if we worked out an arrangement Athena stays here, where there's room for her to run, but you come by every day to help care for her, like joint custody? You might say—" "What's joint custody?" Gracie asked. "It's when two people share responsibility for taking care of someone they both love," Eleanor explained. "My house can be Athena's home, but she'll be your dog too, always." The hope that flickered across Gracie's face was quickly tampered down. "But what about when school starts? I won't be able to come as much." "Well, I was thinking," Eleanor said, her heart suddenly pounding, "maybe you could stay here sometimes too. When your daddy's working nights, this old house has plenty of room, and it gets lonely with just me rattling around in it." The tentative arrangement worked better than either could have hoped. Bill Thompson, perpetually exhausted from his night shifts and the weight of his widowhood, offered no objection to his daughter spending 3 or 4 nights a week at the dog lady's house. If anything, he seemed relieved to be unburdened of parental responsibility for those days, a fact that both saddened Eleanor and strengthened her resolve to provide Gracie with the stability she so desperately needed. Eleanor converted the small bedroom that had once been intended for the children she and Thomas never had into Gracie's space. Together they painted the walls a cheerful yellow and installed bookshelves for Gracie's growing collection of veterinary texts and nature guides. "Never had my own room before," Gracie confessed as they arranged her meager belongings on the shelves. "At home, I sleep on the pull-out couch in the living room. Dad keeps saying we'll get a bigger place someday, but I think he forgets." School began, and Gracie blossomed under the structure of her new life. Mornings at Eleanor's meant proper breakfasts and freshly laundered clothes. Afternoons split between homework, clinic duties with Dr. Franklin, and caring for Athena and Peppermint, the only puppy they'd kept, as the runt required ongoing special attention, gave her purpose and joy. For the first time, teachers began noting Gracie's exceptional intelligence, with her science teacher suggesting she might be gifted enough for advanced placement. By early October, all 5 of the other puppies had been placed in carefully selected homes. Dr. Franklin adopted Atlas. The sheriff took Luna. Mrs. Porter welcomed Ranger into her quiet home, and after much deliberation and a series of supervised visits, Tommy Gunderson's family was allowed to adopt Scout, with the stipulation that Tommy continue his community service and attend the animal welfare classes that had sprung up following the incident. Hero, the energetic female with boundless enthusiasm, found an unexpected home with Ben Hollis from the hardware store, whose wife had been begging for a dog to keep her company during his frequent fishing trips. Life settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly permanent. 3 nights at Eleanor's, 4 nights at his father's became Gracie's weekly schedule, though, as the weeks passed, her belongings gradually migrated more completely to the yellow bedroom. Bill Thompson didn't seem to notice or care, his brief interactions with Eleanor limited to mumbled thanks when she dropped off a casserole or offered to take Gracie for an extra night. "Your daddy seems awful tired these days," Eleanor observed carefully one evening as she and Gracie washed dishes together. "Is everything all right at the factory?" Gracie's small hands stilled in the soapy water. He got a letter yesterday. I think it was important because he read it 3 times. She hesitated. Then he made a phone call and was talking about opportunities and fresh starts. Eleanor felt a chill of premonition. Did he say anything to you about it? No, Gracie said, returning to the dishes. But he was looking at pictures of somewhere called Rochester. He said it was in New York. The chill deepened. Eleanor carefully set down the plate she was drying, afraid her suddenly trembling hands might drop it. I see, she said, working to keep her voice neutral. And did he seem happy about this Rochester place? Gracie shrugged, but her shoulders had tensed. He said something about better pay and benefits, and how maybe it was time to leave this dead-end town. That night, after Gracie had gone to bed, Eleanor sat alone on her porch swing, Athena's heavy head resting on her lap. The German shepherd seemed to sense her distress, occasionally lifting her scarred face to study Eleanor with soulful eyes. What am I going to do, old girl? Eleanor whispered, scratching behind the dog's ears. I can't lose her. Not now. The thought of Gracie being taken away to New York, hundreds of miles from the life she was finally building, from Athena and Peppermint, from Dr. Franklin's mentorship, from the stability she so desperately needed, was physically painful. In just 3 short months, the child had become the center of Eleanor's world, filling the void left by Thomas's death and the children they never had. But Eleanor had no legal claim to Gracie, no rights, no standing. She was simply an elderly neighbor who had opened her home to a neglected child, a temporary arrangement that could be terminated at Bill Thompson's whim. Sleep eluded her that night, her mind racing through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. By morning, she had resolved to speak directly with Bill, to make him understand what uprooting Gracie would do to her. But before she could implement this plan, life intervened in an unexpected way. Dr. Franklin called just as Eleanor was making breakfast, his voice tight with urgency. It's Peppermint, he said without preamble. She's having seizures. How quickly can you and Gracie get to the clinic? The tiny runt puppy, now 4 months old but still significantly smaller than her siblings, had always been delicate. A slight heart murmur, discovered during her first examination, had been monitored but not considered immediately threatening. Now, however, something had changed. Eleanor and Gracie arrived at the clinic in record time, finding Dr. Franklin already setting up for emergency treatment. Peppermint lay on the examination table, her small body racked with intermittent tremors, her breathing shallow and rapid. What happened? Gracie asked, her face pale but composed as she immediately moved to the puppy's side. Respiratory distress followed by neurological symptoms. Dr. Franklin explained, impressed by the child's professional demeanor despite the obvious emotional stakes. I suspect a congenital issue that's been dormant until now. Her heart rhythm is erratic. Tetralogy of Fallot, Gracie said quietly, her hand gently stroking Peppermint's trembling flank. Both Eleanor and Dr. Franklin stared at her. It's a heart defect, Gracie continued, her eyes never leaving the suffering puppy. 4 problems together. I read about it. The symptoms match, the murmur, the weakness, the blue gums when she exercises too hard. Dr. Franklin's expression shifted from surprise to thoughtful consideration. That's Actually, a very sophisticated diagnosis, Gracie, and you might well be right. He quickly adjusted his approach, preparing different medications. If it is tetralogy of Fallot, we need to stabilize her cardiac function immediately. What followed was a tense collaboration between the veteran veterinarian and his 8-year-old assistant. Eleanor watched in amazement as Gracie anticipated Dr. Franklin's needs, handing him instruments before he asked, monitoring vital signs with calm efficiency, and suggesting treatment modifications with the confidence of a trained professional. "Oxygen concentration is dropping again," Gracie reported, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "She needs beta blockers to reduce the right ventricular outflow obstruction." Dr. Franklin nodded, already preparing the injection. "Correct. Can you calculate the dosage based on her current weight?" Without hesitation, Gracie performed the calculation, double-checking her math before confirming the amount. The vet administered the medication, his expression a mixture of concern for the puppy and undisguised admiration for the child's extraordinary knowledge. 3 hours later, Peppermint was stabilized but still critical. Dr. Franklin pulled Eleanor aside while Gracie maintained her vigil at the puppy's side. "That child," he said, shaking his head in wonder, "just demonstrated knowledge I wouldn't expect from a second-year veterinary student. Tetralogy of Fallot is an obscure diagnosis even for canine cardiologists. How she recognized it from reading alone." "Will Peppermint survive?" Eleanor asked, glancing worriedly at Gracie's small form bent over the puppy's kennel. Dr. Franklin's expression sobered. "Honestly, without surgical intervention, her prognosis is poor. This condition requires specialized treatment. A cardiac surgeon who works with animals. The nearest one is at the veterinary school in Charlottesville." "Then that's where we'll go," Eleanor said firmly. "Eleanor," Dr. Franklin said gently, "that kind of surgery costs thousands of dollars. Insurance doesn't cover it, and the clinic can't absorb—" "I don't care what it costs," Eleanor interrupted. "That puppy is everything to Gracie, and right now, Gracie is everything to me." The vet studied her face for a long moment. "You really love that child, don't you? More than I thought I could ever love anyone again after Thomas," Eleanor admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "And now her father's talking about moving to Rochester for a job. I can't lose her, Jeffrey. I just can't." Dr. Franklin's eyes widened at this news. "Bill's planning to leave Willow Creek when— I don't know details yet. Gracie just mentioned it last night." The vet was quiet for a moment, clearly processing this information. "Well," he said finally, "first things first. Let's deal with Peppermint. I'll call my colleague at the veterinary school and arrange emergency transport." By evening, arrangements had been made for Peppermint to be transferred to the University Veterinary Hospital in Charlottesville, where a cardiac specialist would perform the necessary surgery. The cost was indeed staggering, nearly $8,000, but Eleanor didn't hesitate to provide her credit card information. "I've been saving Thomas's life insurance all these years," she told Dr. Franklin when he expressed concern about the expense. "Never had anything worth spending it on. Until now." The emotional toll on Gracie was evident, despite her remarkable composure. As they prepared Peppermint for transport, the child maintained her clinical detachment, helping attach monitoring equipment and ensure the puppy was comfortable for the journey. But when the moment came for the animal ambulance to depart, her careful facade cracked. "What if she dies while I'm not there?" she whispered to Eleanor, her small body rigid with the effort of containing her emotions. "What if she's scared without me?" Eleanor knelt, despite her protesting knees, bringing herself to eye level with the child. "Peppermint knows you love her. Animals sense these things. And you've given her the best possible chance by recognizing what was wrong." "I should go with her," Gracie insisted. "The doctors need space to work, honey. And you need to be here for Athena. She's worried about her baby, too." As if summoned by her name, Athena, who had been waiting patiently in Eleanor's car, began to howl, a mournful sound that seemed to express exactly what Gracie couldn't allow herself to release. The child's composure finally shattered. She turned and buried her face against Eleanor's shoulder, her small body racked with sobs. Eleanor held her tightly, her own tears falling into Gracie's copper hair. "It's not fair," Gracie choked out between sobs. "Why does everything I love have to get hurt or go away?" The raw anguish in the question broke Eleanor's heart. In that moment, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Not everything, sweetheart," she promised fiercely. "Not everyone. I'm not going anywhere. And we're going to fight for Peppermint with everything we've got." The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching their subdued mood. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold, waiting for the phone to ring with news from Charlottesville. Gracie had finally fallen asleep just before dawn, emotionally exhausted after hours of worried vigilance. Athena lay beside the child's bed, refusing to leave her post despite Eleanor's attempts to coax her outside. The sharp knock at the front door startled Eleanor from her thoughts. She opened it to find Bill Thompson standing on her porch, his tall frame stooped with perpetual exhaustion, dark circles shadowing his eyes. At 34, he looked a decade older, grief and hard work having carved premature lines into his once handsome face. "Bill," Eleanor said, surprised. He had never come to her house before, always waiting in his idling truck when he occasionally picked up Gracie. "Come in. Gracie's still sleeping." "That's fine," he said, stepping awkwardly into her living room. "Actually, I came to talk to you." Eleanor's heart began to pound. "Coffee?" "No, thanks." He remained standing, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, Mrs. Pritchard." "Eleanor, please." "Eleanor, I appreciate everything you've done for Gracie these past months. More than I can say." There was a but coming. She could hear it forming. "I got a job offer," he continued, "in Rochester, manufacturing supervisor. Better pay, benefits, regular hours." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "It's a fresh start, something we need." "I see," Eleanor said carefully. "When would you be leaving?" 2 weeks. They need me to start November 1st. 2 weeks. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "That's very sudden," she managed. "Gracie's just getting settled in school here. She's doing so well with Dr. Franklin at the clinic, and her puppy." Eleanor's voice caught. "Peppermint's having heart surgery in Charlottesville today." Bill frowned. "Surgery for a dog who's paying for that?" "I am," Eleanor said, lifting her chin slightly. Something like shame flickered across Bill's face. "Mrs. Pritchard, Eleanor, I can't let you spend that kind of money on us." "I'm not doing it for you," she replied, more sharply than intended. Then, softening, "I'm doing it for Gracie, and for myself, if I'm honest. That child has brought life back to this old house. Bill. And those dogs mean everything to her." Bill sank heavily onto the couch, suddenly looking utterly defeated. "I know she's happy here. Happier than she's been since Rebecca died." He stared at his calloused hands. "I'm not blind, Mrs. Pritchard. I know I've failed her." "You've been grieving," Eleanor said gently, "and trying to keep a roof over her head." "Been doing a piss-poor job of both," he said bitterly. "Can't look at her without seeing Rebecca's eyes staring back at me. Can't afford to give her half of what she deserves. And now," he gestured vaguely, "she's found someone who can do both better than me." Eleanor sat beside him, her arthritis protesting the quick movement. "No one's trying to replace you. Bill, you're her father." "Am I?" he asked hollowly. "When's the last time I knew what she was learning in school, what she ate for lunch, what she dreams about?" He shook his head. "Rebecca was the one who understood Gracie. They were two peas in a pod, both smart as whips with their noses always in some book about animals. I never knew how to connect with her. Even before." He trailed off, and Eleanor saw the raw pain still etched in every line of his face. 3 years hadn't dulled the edge of his loss. "This job in Rochester," Eleanor said carefully, "is it really what's best for Gracie?" Bill was quiet for a long moment. "It's what's best for me," he finally admitted, the truth seeming to surprise even him. "Better pay, sure, but mostly." "And a place without memories on every corner, without Rebecca's ghost walking these streets." His voice broke slightly. "That's a terrible thing for a father to say, isn't it, that I'm putting myself first?" "It's an honest thing," Eleanor replied, "and honesty's where healing starts." From down the hallway came the sound of movement, Athena's nails clicking on the hardwood, followed by the creak of Gracie's bedroom door opening. A moment later, the child appeared in the living room doorway, hair tousled from sleep, eyes wide with surprise at seeing her father on Eleanor's couch. "Dad, what are you doing here? Is something wrong?" Bill stood awkwardly. "Hey, Peanut, no, nothing's wrong. I just came to talk to Mrs. Pritchard about some things." Gracie's perceptive gaze darted between them, reading the tension in the room. "Is it about Rochester? Are we moving?" The directness of the question seemed to catch Bill off guard. You knew about that." "I saw the letters," Gracie said simply, "and heard you on the phone." Bill sighed, running a hand through his hair again. "Come sit down, Peanut. We should talk about this." Gracie moved to the couch, but instead of sitting beside her father, she perched on the armchair next to Eleanor, Athena immediately settling at her feet. The symbolism wasn't lost on Bill, whose face tightened briefly with hurt before resolving into resignation. "I got offered a good job in Rochester," he explained. "Better than the factory. We'd have a real apartment, not just the rental. Maybe even a house someday." Gracie said nothing. her face carefully blank in that way Eleanor had come to recognize as her shield against disappointment. "But," Bill continued, surprising both Gracie and Eleanor, "I've been thinking that maybe that's not the right move for you right now." Gracie blinked, confusion replacing the careful blankness. "What do you mean?" Bill looked at Eleanor, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue. "You've put down roots here, Peanut," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You've got Dr. Franklin teaching you all that animal doctor stuff. You've got your dogs. You've got a place where you're thriving." He swallowed hard. "Your mom would want that for you more than anything." Hope flickered across Gracie's face, quickly tamped down. "But you need the job," she said, ever the practical one. "We need the money." "I do need the job," Bill agreed. "But maybe we could work something out where I take the position and you stay here in Willow Creek with Mrs. Pritchard, at least for a while." The shock on Gracie's face mirrored what Eleanor felt. This was not at all what she had expected when Bill appeared on her doorstep. You wouldn't take me with you?" Gracie asked, her voice small. Bill flinched at the question, clearly hearing an accusation of abandonment. "It's not about not wanting you with me, Gracie. It's about what's best for you. And I think—" His voice cracked slightly. "I think your mother would agree that you're better off here right now." Eleanor found her voice. "Bill, are you suggesting—" "Temporary guardianship," he said, the words coming out in a rush as if he might lose courage. "Legal paperwork so you could make decisions for her. School, medical, all that. I'd still be her father, still send money, still call and visit when I can. But she'd stay here, where she's happy, where she has what she needs." The magnitude of what he was offering hung in the air between them. Not just permission for occasional sleepovers, but a legal transfer of parental responsibility, an admission that Eleanor could provide what he couldn't. "You'd do that?" Gracie whispered, disbelief written across her face. Bill looked at his daughter, really looked at her perhaps for the first time in years. "Peanut, do you remember what Mom used to say about being a parent?" Gracie shook her head. "She said that loving your child means wanting what's best for them, even when it breaks your heart." His voice was thick with emotion. "I haven't been very good at that. I've been so lost in missing her that I forgot how to see you. But I'm trying to do right by you now." Tears welled in Gracie's eyes. "But what about you? You'll be all alone." The simple concern for his welfare, after years of his emotional neglect, seemed to hit Bill harder than any accusation could have. His composure cracked, and for a moment Eleanor saw the depth of pain he had been carrying alone. "I've been alone, even with you there." "Peanut," he admitted, tears tracking down his stubbled cheeks. "That's not your fault. That's on me. But maybe with some distance, with some help, maybe I can figure out how to be the dad you deserve." The phone call from Charlottesville came just as Bill was leaving. Eleanor answered with trepidation, her hand shaking slightly as she held the receiver. "Mrs. Pritchard, this is Dr. Melissa Hayward from the University Veterinary Hospital. I'm calling about Peppermint." Eleanor's eyes met Gracie's. the child frozen in anticipation, able to hear only one side of the conversation. "Yes, doctor. How did the surgery go?" There was a pause that seemed to stretch for eternity. "I understand," Eleanor said finally. "Thank you for calling." She hung up the phone and turned to face Gracie, whose face had gone pale with dread. "The surgery was successful," Eleanor announced, a smile breaking across her face. "Peppermint came through it better than expected. She's in recovery now." The relief that flooded Gracie's expression was so profound that Eleanor felt her own knees weaken in sympathetic response. Bill, who had been halfway out the door, paused to witness his daughter's joy. "She's going to be okay?" Gracie asked, needing confirmation. "Dr. Hayward says she'll need to stay there for about a week for monitoring, but barring any complications, she should make a full recovery. She'll always have to be careful with exercise, but she can live a normal life." Gracie threw her arms around Eleanor's waist, burying her face against the older woman's sweater. "Thank you," she whispered fiercely. "Thank you for saving her." Over the child's head, Eleanor's eyes met Bill's. Something passed between them, an understanding, an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between his daughter and this woman who had stepped into the void in Gracie's life. "I'll let you two celebrate," Bill said quietly. "We can talk more about the arrangements later. Mrs. Pritchard, I'll have my lawyer draw up the guardianship papers this week." And as he turned to leave, Gracie suddenly pulled away from Eleanor and ran to her father, wrapping her thin arms around his waist, just as she had done with Eleanor moments before. "Thank you, Dad," she said, her voice muffled against his work jacket, "for understanding about Peppermint and everything else." Bill stood frozen for a moment, clearly unprepared for this display of affection from the daughter he had held at emotional arm's length for so long. Then, hesitantly, he knelt down and embraced her properly. "You're a good kid, Gracie," he said roughly. "The best thing I ever did. Your mom would be so proud of the person you're becoming." As Eleanor watched this tentative reconnection, she felt a curious mixture of emotions, joy that father and daughter might find their way back to each other, fear that Bill might change his mind about the guardianship, and a fierce, protective love for the child who had somehow become the center of her world in just a few short months. The weeks that followed unfolded with a strange dichotomy of emotions. There was the joy of Peppermint's successful recovery and homecoming, the excitement of making Gracie's stay at Eleanor's official, and the bittersweet preparations for Bill's departure to Rochester. Sheriff Barnes, who had been quietly observing the situation for months, stepped in to expedite the legal proceedings. "Called in some favors with Judge Mitchell," he explained, as he handed Eleanor the guardianship papers 3 days after her conversation with Bill. "These usually take weeks to process. But given the circumstances, well, let's just say the judge has a soft spot for kids and dogs." Dr. Franklin became an unexpected ally in helping Gracie process her complicated feelings about her father's departure. "You know," he told her one afternoon as they monitored Peppermint's recovery in the clinic, "I lost my daughter to leukemia 5 years ago." Gracie looked up in surprise. Looked up. The vet had never spoken of his personal life before. "Her name was Lily. She was about your age when she got sick." He adjusted Peppermint's IV with careful hands. "After she died, I couldn't bear to look at her pictures or talk about her. It hurt too much. Like my dad with my mom, Gracie said quietly. Dr. Franklin nodded. Exactly like that. Grief does strange things to people. Gracie, it can make a father unable to see his daughter clearly because the resemblance to her mother is too painful. But you got better, Gracie observed. You have Lily's picture on your desk now. The vet smiled sadly. It took time and help. I started volunteering at the children's hospital where Lily was treated, being around kids again, helping them. It began to heal something in me. Do you think my dad will get better in Rochester? Dr. Franklin considered this thoughtfully. I think your father is taking a brave step toward healing, and the fact that he can recognize what you need, even when it's different from what he needs right now, that shows how much he loves you. These conversations, along with Eleanor's steady presence, helped Gracie navigate the complex emotions of her father's imminent departure. For his part, Bill seemed both relieved by his decision and determined to prove he wasn't abandoning his child. He visited Eleanor's house several times that week, awkwardly attempting to engage with Gracie in a way he hadn't for years. "Found this in a box in the attic," he said during one visit, handing Gracie a worn leather case. "It was your mom's field kit from vet school. Thought you might want to have it." Gracie opened the case with trembling hands to reveal a collection of basic veterinary tools, a stethoscope, otoscope, reflex hammer, and various other instruments, all carefully maintained despite their age. "Mom's tools," she whispered, running her fingers reverently over the stethoscope. "She used these." Bill nodded, an unfamiliar softness in his expression. "Every day. She was always bringing home strays and patching them up. Drove me crazy sometimes. Coming home to find raccoons in the bathtub or baby birds in shoe boxes all over the kitchen." "Really?" Gracie looked up eagerly, hungry for these glimpses of the mother she barely remembered. "Oh, yeah. One time she brought home a fox kit with a broken leg. Nursed that thing back to health right in our spare room. Had me building a special rehabilitation enclosure in the backyard." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Your mom was something else. Gracie, and you're so much like her it sometimes takes my breath away. These moments of connection, however tentative, were healing for both father and daughter." Eleanor observed them with mixed emotions, glad for Gracie's sake that Bill was making an effort, yet unable to quell the fear that he might change his mind about the guardianship. Her fears intensified when, 3 days before his scheduled departure, Bill arrived at her house with an unexpected visitor, a slender woman in a crisp suit who introduced herself as Sandra Watkins from Child Protective Services. "This is just a standard home evaluation. Mrs. Pritchard." "Ms." Watkins explained, as she surveyed Eleanor's living room with an appraising eye. "In cases of guardianship transfer, we need to ensure the child's new environment is suitable." Eleanor felt a surge of panic. No one had mentioned a home evaluation. Her house was comfortable but old, with creaking floorboards and ancient plumbing. What if it was deemed unsuitable? What if her age was considered a disqualifying factor? The social worker spent nearly 2 hours examining every aspect of Eleanor's home, asking detailed questions about her finances, health, and ability to care for a child. She observed Gracie's interactions with Eleanor and Athena, reviewed school records, and spoke privately with both Gracie and Bill. When the evaluation was finally complete, Ms. Watkins sat at Eleanor's kitchen table, her expression unreadable as she made final notes in her folder. "Ms. Watkins," Eleanor said, unable to bear the suspense any longer. "Is there a problem with the guardianship arrangement?" The social worker looked up, her professional mask softening slightly. "Mrs. Pritchard, I've been doing this job for 17 years. In that time, I've seen arrangements made for all sorts of reasons, many of them less than ideal." Eleanor's heart sank. "And this one, Ms. Watkins said, closing her folder, is actually one of the most thoughtful I've encountered. A father recognizing his limitations and prioritizing his child's stability. A child finding a nurturing environment where her talents are valued. A guardian who clearly loves this child as her own." She offered a rare smile. "My report will strongly recommend approval of the guardianship petition." The relief that swept through Eleanor was so intense she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. "There is one thing, however," Ms. Watkins added, her expression growing serious again. "In reviewing Gracie's records, I noticed something rather extraordinary. Her academic assessments, particularly in sciences, indicate exceptional cognitive abilities. Has anyone ever suggested testing her for gifted programs?" Before Eleanor could respond, Bill spoke up from where he had been quietly observing. "Rebecca, my wife always said Gracie was special that way. Said she had a mind like a steel trap, especially for anything to do with animals. But after Rebecca died..." He trailed off, shame evident in his expression. "I guess I stopped noticing a lot of things." The social worker nodded, making a final note. "I'm going to include a recommendation for comprehensive educational assessment. A child with Gracie's abilities needs specialized support to reach her full potential." As Ms. Watkins gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. "One more thing. Mrs. Pritchard, the story about how you and Gracie met with the dog and the bees, it's quite remarkable. Sheriff Barnes mentioned it during my background inquiries." Eleanor nodded, unsure where this was going. "Sometimes," Ms. Watkins said thoughtfully, "the most unusual circumstances bring together exactly the right people at exactly the right time. I've learned not to question the mysteries of how families form." 6 months later, on a crisp December morning, Eleanor sat on her porch swing watching Gracie lead Athena and a fully recovered Peppermint through their morning exercises in the yard. The German Shepherd, her scars now covered by a winter coat of thick fur, followed the child's commands with devoted attention. Peppermint, still smaller than average but vibrant with life, pranced alongside her mother with the special energy of one who has been granted a second chance. "Left Peppermint's medication on the counter," called Dr. Franklin as he climbed into his Jeep, parked in Eleanor's driveway. "Gracie knows the dosage." "Course she does," Eleanor replied with a smile. "Child probably knows your job better than you by now." The veterinarian laughed. "Don't think I don't know it. She's already corrected my treatment plan twice this month." He shook his head in amazement. "Never seen anything like her." As his vehicle pulled away, Eleanor reflected on the changes 6 months had brought. Bill had settled in Rochester, calling Gracie twice weekly and visiting once a month. These visits, initially awkward, had gradually evolved into something healthier. A father and daughter getting to know each other without the shadow of grief hanging quite so heavily between them. The guardianship had been finalized without complication, giving Eleanor legal authority to make decisions for Gracie's welfare while preserving Bill's parental rights. It was an arrangement that honored the complexity of their situation, a chosen family supplementing a biological one. Ms. Watkins' recommendation for educational assessment had led to Gracie's placement in an accelerated program at school, with additional mentorship at the veterinary clinic. Dr. Franklin had arranged for her to attend a summer program at the University Veterinary Hospital in Charlottesville, the same one where Peppermint had undergone surgery. "She'll be the youngest participant by at least 8 years," he had told Eleanor proudly. "But my colleague Dr. Hayward was so impressed by Gracie's questions during Peppermint's follow-up visits that she's making an exception." The porch door opened, and Gracie emerged with 2 steaming mugs. "Made you some hot chocolate," she said, carefully handing one to Eleanor. "With the little marshmallows. Just how you like it." "Thank you, Sweet Pea," Eleanor replied, noting how the child's once hollow cheeks had filled out, how her mismatched clothes had been replaced with proper winter gear, all gifts from the clinic staff who had adopted her as their unofficial mascot. They sat in companionable silence, watching Athena and Peppermint play in the yard. "Christmas is next week," Eleanor said after a while. "Been thinking we should make it special this year." Gracie looked up with interest. Since discovering the child had spent last Christmas alone with a TV dinner while her father worked a double shift, Eleanor had been planning something significant. "Dr. Franklin and his wife are coming for dinner," Eleanor continued. "Sheriff Barnes, too. And your dad called last night after you went to bed. He's driving down Christmas Eve, staying through the weekend." Gracie's face brightened. "Really? He's coming all that way?" "Said he wouldn't miss it for the world," Eleanor confirmed. "And he's bringing something special, apparently. Wouldn't tell me what. Just said it was a surprise he's been working on for months." Gracie's expression was thoughtful as she sipped her hot chocolate. "Do you think Dad is happier now in Rochester?" Eleanor considered this carefully. Her weekly phone conversations with Bill had revealed a man slowly finding his way back to himself, the weight of grief gradually lightening as he built a new life. "I think he's healing," she said finally. "And a big part of that is knowing you're thriving here. Seeing you happy gives him permission to find his own happiness again." "I miss him sometimes," Gracie admitted softly. "Not like before, not the sad him who couldn't look at me. But I miss having a dad." Eleanor put her arm around the child's shoulders. "He'll always be your father. Sweet Pea, this arrangement doesn't change that. It just gives you more people to love you, not fewer." Gracie leaned against Eleanor's side, a gesture of trust and affection that still had the power to make the older woman's heart swell with emotion. "I was thinking," Gracie said after a moment, "about what happened with Athena and the bees. How if those mean boys hadn't done that awful thing, we might never have met. Is it bad that I'm kind of glad it happened? Not the part where Athena got hurt," she clarified quickly, "but the part where it brought us all together." Eleanor considered this philosophical question with the seriousness it deserved. "I don't think it's bad at all. Sometimes beautiful things grow from terrible beginnings, like wild flowers after a forest fire." Gracie nodded, satisfied with this answer. "That's what I thought, too." The week before Christmas brought a flurry of preparations. Eleanor, who hadn't properly celebrated the holiday since Thomas died, found herself caught up in Gracie's excitement. Together they decorated the old farmhouse, baked cookies from Eleanor's mother's recipes, and wrapped gifts for their expanding circle of friends. Tommy Gunderson, whose community service at the clinic had evolved into a genuine interest in veterinary work, stopped by with his mother to deliver a handmade toy for Peppermint, a feat of engineering designed to be gentle enough for a dog with cardiac limitations. Figured out how to make it stimulating without requiring too much exertion, the boy explained awkwardly. Unable to meet Gracie's eyes directly, the shame of his past actions still evident despite months of atonement. Gracie accepted the gift with grave courtesy. Their relationship remained complex, not quite friendship, but no longer enmity. The shared experience at the clinic had created a tentative bridge between them. "It's really well made," she acknowledged, examining the contraption with expert eyes. "Peppermint will love figuring it out." Tommy's mother looked on with tears in her eyes, grateful for this small gesture of forgiveness from the child her son had once tormented. Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow, the first of the season. Bill's arrival was marked by the unfamiliar sound of Gracie's delighted laughter as she ran to meet his truck. Eleanor watched from the doorway as father and daughter embraced. Noting the changes in Bill, he stood straighter, the perpetual exhaustion less evident in his face. He had gained some weight, his clothes no longer hanging on his frame. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Pritchard," he said as he approached the porch, Gracie's hand firmly in his. "Thanks for having me." "It's Eleanor," she reminded him gently. "And this is your daughter's home, too. You're always welcome here." The mysterious surprise Bill had mentioned turned out to be a handcrafted oak bookcase, designed specifically to hold veterinary texts and reference materials. "Been taking a woodworking class at the community center," he explained as he and Sheriff Barnes carried it into Gracie's bedroom. "Figured if you're going to follow in your mom's footsteps, you need a proper place for all those books." Gracie ran her fingers over the smooth wood, tracing the carved details, delicate vines, with small animals hidden among the leaves. "It's beautiful, Dad," she whispered. "Did you make all this yourself?" Bill nodded, uncharacteristically shy about his accomplishment. "Took a while to get the animal carvings right. Had to keep starting over. But I wanted it to be special." Eleanor observed this moment of connection between father and daughter with a full heart. This was what she had hoped for, not a replacement of Gracie's family, but an expansion of it, a healing of old wounds while new bonds formed. Christmas Day dawned clear and bright. The house filled with the sounds and scents of celebration. Dr. Franklin and his wife arrived bearing gifts. Sheriff Barnes brought his famous apple cider, and the dogs wore festive bandanas that Gracie had made herself. As they gathered around the table for dinner, Eleanor looked at the faces surrounding her, some new to her life, some who had been there all along but now connected in deeper ways. This unlikely family, forged in crisis and cemented by love, represented everything she had thought lost to her after Thomas died. When Sheriff Barnes suggested they each share something they were grateful for before eating, Gracie was the first to speak. "I'm grateful for second chances," she said simply, "for Peppermint's heart being fixed, for Dad finding his happiness again, for Miss Eleanor giving me a home." She looked at the faces around the table. "And I'm grateful that even when bad things happen, like Athena getting hurt, Something good can come after. Bill cleared his throat, clearly emotional. I'm grateful for wisdom that sometimes comes from unexpected places. He glanced at his daughter. Gracie, when your mom died, I thought that was the end of our family. I couldn't see past my own pain to realize that family isn't something that ends. It changes, grows, finds new ways to be. Dr. Franklin raised his glass. To finding family in unexpected places, he said, and to a little girl who taught an old veterinarian a few new tricks. When it came to Eleanor's turn, she found herself momentarily unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She looked at Gracie, this remarkable child who had burst into her life amid crisis and pain, bringing purpose and joy in her wake. I'm grateful, she said finally, for the sound of bees. Everyone looked confused except Gracie, whose eyes widened with understanding. Because without them, Eleanor continued, I might never have known what it means to be a mother. Life has a way of finding us when we're most alone, doesn't it? Like Eleanor, many of us understand the silence of an empty house, the weight of memories in rooms where loved ones once laughed. We've all felt that hollowness after losing a spouse, watching children grow distant, or finding ourselves suddenly unnecessary in a world that once needed us. But Eleanor's story reminds us that family isn't always born. Sometimes it's discovered in the most painful circumstances. Sometimes it's a child who needs us as desperately as we need them. Sometimes it's a scarred German shepherd with eyes that see into our souls. The most beautiful gardens often grow from the most disturbed soil. Remember that retirement isn't the closing of a book, but the turning of a page. Your wisdom, your patience, your lifetime of learning to love through loss. These are gifts still desperately needed in this world. There are Gracies out there looking for Eleanors. There are wounded creatures needing the gentle hands that only experience can provide. Your heart's capacity to love hasn't diminished with age, it's expanded. And like Eleanor discovered on that fateful summer day, sometimes the most painful moments lead us exactly where we're meant to be.